Good afternoon, everybody. I am Michelle Del Rosario, and I'm here to share William's and our family's journey to communication for him. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And just a reminder that this presentation is an informal, for informational purposes only. I am not a professional. I'm a mom, and I'm here to share our journey and hopefully provide you all with some hope and inspiration for your own children. So, here we are, our family of 5. We live here in Southern California. Dan is my husband of 28 years. And we have 3 children. Joseph, our oldest, he's in grad school in Atlanta at Georgia Tech. So it's always fun to go there. And our daughter Emily, she's in grad school here at Cal State Fullerton. And then this young man we have here with me today, I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself next. Go ahead,
buddy. Good afternoon. My name is William Del Rosario, and I am honored to be here today to share about how I communicate. It might surprise you to know for most of my life I was not presumed to be able to communicate because I have autism and am non-speaking. That could not be more false. In fact, I have always had my words ready, but they were locked and I had no real way to share my thoughts. Yes, well-meaning staff at school worked on teaching me pictures to ask for my favorite foods or things, but they always stopped there. I had opinions, comments, and ideas, but was never asked. That all changed when my mom and dad bought me an iPad and Proloquo to go. I started to learn to type with my ABA team at home. Only they found a way to help me when everyone else wanted to give up.
Thank you, William. All right, so let's get started. So William spelled out that introduction on a letterboard and then transferred it to typing. So he is what we call a multimodal communicator. For those of you that were in here with the presentation previously, you heard a little bit more about different modalities. So I'm going to tell you how we got to this by sharing our journey with you. So you see here in the early years, we have William. He was probably about 15 months here. We started to notice signs of regression when he was about 9 months. He just wasn't quite hitting those milestones. He had some preliminary language. I want the ball, go play. I'm trying to think what else. Bottle, Blues Clues, fruit snacks, things that toddlers typically had. And then he started to regress into autism. By the time he was about 15 months, I think I kind of knew. And the area he was most significantly impacted with was with speech and language. So we did have a lot of medical things going on with him at the time. He had chronic ear infections. That may sound familiar to some of you. And you'll be hearing about a lot of biomedical talks and dietary interventions that can help with that. And those did help William eventually. But when he was younger, we didn't know about that. We took him to a neurologist, and they diagnosed him with what was called PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified initially, and they didn't really quite know what to do for him, but we did qualify for regional center services. For those of you in California, you're familiar with regional center. For those of you who are not in California, it is like a statewide program for early intervention. So we qualified for that. Probably about 5 or 6 months of that before going into the school system. You transfer the school system at age 3, and we started out with all of the assessments that the IEP team does. We had a self-funded insurance plan that did not qualify William for speech therapy, believe it or not. That's what it was back then. It's different now, and we're glad to hear that here in California. But we did get the diagnosis of autism formally when he was about 3 to 4 years old. So we were in the school system, and we were really reliant upon their services. So we, had William go through all of the standardized assessments. And there are difficulties in assessing a non-speaking child. Some of you here may have non-speaking children. And you see little snippets of their intellect, and you see, that they have potential, but those assessments come back, and they really don't always offer you that kind of hope. And that's what we encountered. It was really difficult for our team to see William's potential. But they did initially see that he had some, significant speech impairment, so they provided us with PECS, the Picture Exchange Communication System. Are you all familiar with that? Yeah, okay. So this was William's PECS book that we had, and I did have the foresight to read through, that big packet they give you in your IEP with your rights and all of that, and I found some resources in there that helped me learn that they had to send me to parent training. So I had them send me to the PECS training, and in that training I learned about the discrimination phases of PECS, the traveling phases, the communication partner, all of those things. And I implemented them at home. You can see William's PECS are very worn. We got to the point where William was actually creating some pretty novel exchanges. He was coming one day, we remember this story, and if you know me, I've probably heard it, and I'm sorry for repeating myself. But William came to Dan, and he wanted to go to McDonald's, and he did not have that icon in his book, so he improvised. He chose, "I want Old McDonald song French fries." And you bet we jumped in the car and we did all of that, and we were so excited, but we had a team that was telling us that William could not discriminate from a field of 3. We had a team telling us that William could not initiate, and that his words really didn't have any meaning. In that one exchange, we looked at each other and we're like, this kid has all of those things. We think it's the team that maybe has this wrong. But, again, they did not have all of the supports that we had at home. At home, he was one-on-one with my husband and myself. He didn't have a one-on-one assistant. We felt there was a need, but we couldn't successfully advocate for that. And we were, practicing all of these tools. Now, they do trainings and that with staff, and I don't always know the level of training. That can vary year to year. Some of you in the school system maybe experienced that with your own teams, and we certainly did. They convinced us that we had enough staff-to-student ratio in the classroom, that it was going to satisfy this. But when I went in to do an observation, what I observed, if you've been through preschool settings, is they have these centers that the children rotate around, the students rotate. So what they had in the language-rich environment classroom was the visual strips with the PECs on them at each center, and the children would rotate, and they would pull the PEC, and they would put it into a red Solo cup. And I realized that was William's communication partner, the red plastic cup. And I thought, well, that's not really the exchange. And who is he communicating with? Who's receiving that message? Here, this little kid was doing, and that's a big motor act. If you think of the challenges some of our children have with transitioning to a new center, the motor act of pulling it and selecting visually the right one, and then getting it into a precise location, that is a big step, but that's not really necessarily communication. So I went back to our team and I said, what about the exchange? What about who's receiving that message? And the response I got from one of the team members was, well, it's not really exchange. We're just going to make it the picture communication system. So he did a lot of labeling, a lot of nouns, a lot of noun plus the or adjective plus the noun, I want. So you've probably seen those requests, those short phrases. And they're important and they're an initial first step for our children. But you don't think about your own communication. Someone shows you something, and you want this? And I'm like, no, I don't want it. Well, he should be able to tell me, no, I don't want it. He should have an opinion. He should have likes, dislikes, and a robust vocabulary. So we did try some of that, and his book got really fat, but it wasn't really totally implemented in the school system. And that's kind of where we had the fallout. He didn't have a communication partner a lot. So we started observing more and more and more in the classroom and learning more about how they were going to apply these academics using some form of communication, because I wanted them to have access to communication and academics. However, what I started observing was that the classroom was really what they it was autism specific. It was more of a life skills type program, and there really weren't any academics. Well, that didn't set well with me because I'd seen my other two children go through the education system. My father was a teacher. My mom worked in the education system too. And I had the benefit of all of that, and I thought we have to modify the teaching somehow so that he can start to learn literacy and access. So we worked on our home program. I worked with what we did have, and we had regional center services, as I said. We didn't qualify for ABA through our insurance because we were not an insurance-mandated state for autism services as we are now. William was born in 2000, so it was some time back. So I had a great ABA team. I had taken William in the midst of all of our IEP challenges. I took him in for an independent evaluation with the BCBA, and I took his PECS book, and I met up with this wonderful BCBA who's still, our agency today, and she had him so engaged. I had never seen him that engaged before, and I thought, what is she doing differently? Well, first of all, she wasn't talking to him like a toddler. He was about 8 now. She was presuming competence in him, and exchanging and engaging with him. It was very much natural environment. He wasn't sitting at the little table. And I don't want to knock ABA methodologies because DTT, discrete trial training, is very necessary for some kids as a first step, and some kids respond very well to it. I'm not sure how much it benefited William, but it wasn't exactly what he wanted. And I started to realize that William had an affinity for the alphabet. So what I did at home, because we did not have iPads back then, this was 2008, so aging myself here, and we didn't have the means with which to get speech therapy and everything that we have now. I made my own curriculum from the dollar store. So this plastic board that these letter icons are on is a plastic cutting board. You can buy them 3 for $1. And my Velcro and my laminating machine using PowerPoint because I couldn't afford BoardMaker. And I made the alphabet for William. And I started with teaching him just the letters first. And then I started teaching him the phonetics and going on from there and there. Still wasn't, communication, but it was early literacy. And I thought back to an experience that I had, my very first experience with AAC, when I was 19 years old. I worked for Sears, and a young man came into the store, and he was able to express to me, I'll go back to how he came in. He came in a wheelchair, and he had a large board, one of those table boards over the front of his wheelchair, and it was fashioned. Somebody had the foresight to fashion it with letters and pictures, and enough for him to be functional and independent. I don't know if anybody was shadowing him or if he came in independently, but those of you that are parents in the room know what a big step it is for an individual to have the independence. Katie talked about independence previously, what that might look like. It might have supports, it might have accommodations, and this young man was very independent, and he came and he expressed to me that he wanted to purchase socks. And it was a big deal, and I'd love to go back and look at that board because it's something that somebody had the foresight for him. And when I thought back to that young man when William was at this point, was like, who's going to be doing this for him? I didn't have insurance. I didn't have a team that was necessarily doing that for him, so the answer came back to me. So I would do these things, these visuals and stimuli, and then our team would come in and I'd explain to them rapid fire what I'd read on the internet that night, and they would start implementing. So slowly but surely we started teaching William to communicate and to spell and to have a repertoire of vocabulary. So once we did that, I started working on art because I had to get myself in a place where I was able to we got some spoons still. I started to get myself into a place where I was able to do a little bit more advocating. And I learned more about AAC, and I learned about devices. And this is what we had back then. We had the Springboard 2000. If you look at this now, it's so basic. It had, 8 icons on there that William was able to choose from. It half the time didn't work. It didn't have a charge. The icons were challenging to program. I knew how to program it, and somehow William learned how to program it too. One day he came home and he had the court gesture for the teacher, and I got it with spinning stars for the OT, and I thought, oh my gosh, he got into this, but he somehow hacked it and figured out the password. So, because it wasn't being used appropriately, the teacher took it away, which you never want to take away a child's voice, but that's what was happening to this poor kid. Eventually we did get the AlphaSmart. That's kind of like a word processor, but without a communication partner and without the other children in the classroom being exposed to literacy and a voice output, it really was not a communication device. It was good for William independently spelling his spelling words at the table and doing some academics like that, but it was not a communication device. But that's what was given. It could have been if he had a communication partner, but he didn't. So what was going on back then at the same time was that I found TACA. I went to my first TACA meeting and networked with some parents. I went to my first conference. They used to be called Real Help Now conferences. And I saw a device. It had the icons on the front and it had the alphabet on the back. It was a touch screen. It was slick, but it was huge. And I thought, wow, this could really serve William. It had a price tag of about $8,000. And we had already gone through some litigation and due process to get my son some of the services he needed. And I came home to Dan and I said, do we want to spend the money on the device or do we want to spend the money on the attorney? And he said, let's spend it on the device because we can have that for when William's 18, just like that young man that we saw as an adult going in. It would be our device, it would be the schools, and we'd have the opportunity to implement that for him into his adulthood. But before I did that, I networked with these TACA moms, and we had a mom's night out, and a mom told me, I was raving about this device that I saw, and also lamenting a little bit about the price tag it had. And she said, you might want to wait because there's this thing called the iPad coming out. Mm-hmm. And there's an app that I have on my iTouch, it's called Proloco to Go, and it's really great. It's got the icons, and you can use the QWERTY board on it, and you can type on it, and you can kind of combine them. And I think from what you described, it might help William. TACA moms are the smartest moms out there. You've got to because, with the investment in the iTouch initially, the features that it had, it was very affordable. It was able to go out in the community with us. William, who, if any of you have spent some time texting with your teens, like I do, is exhausting. Imagine a child with a apraxia and dyspraxia and dexterity difficulties having to type out everything. But then imagine a child who's so motivated by something and the communication message they want to get out. And that's exactly what William did in the picture. His first big communication breakthrough was an exchange he had with Santa Claus. And it was presents, DVDs, Veggie Tales. So he was able to not just say, I want DVD, he was able to follow up with Santa and have an exchange with him in a real meaningful communication exchange at that. So the one thing about this app, and I'm not promoting any one specific app, but it is the app that was out at the time. Again, remember, William was born in 2000, so this is what we had available to us back then. And it was an investment we were willing to make. We invested in the iPad when it did come out, and we were able to transfer that same app to this device and all of the updates to devices that have come out since then. So it's been a great investment for us, and it's been a game changer for us. So we have AAC, which is augmentative and alternative communication, which is for the communication, and then we have the technology piece, which is the device. Sometimes you need some low-tech, like the letterboard or other apps and that's where the assistive technology piece is. And I wanted to touch on that a little bit with you. There'll be another talk, I think it's after this one, on AAC now what. But kind of know that sometimes you need both in your IEP. If you have a non-speaking child, a lot of times they only look at the AAC piece, but they sometimes forget the assistive technology piece. And that can be other things that you need, a math app or something like that. So be sure, if you're requesting those evaluations, that you're specifying both. That's what I wanted to touch on that point. One of the things that we were arguing with at the time for William is we thought he needed to have maximum speech because we were going after verbal speech for him. was that we thought he had something called apraxia of speech. And I'm not going to get into everything about apraxia of speech, but if you go to the apraxiakids.org, down at the bottom you can find the definition and the resources that you need to help decide if your child possibly has apraxia of speech. And I wanted to mention this because this is something that was really a big aha moment for me, understanding the difference between speech, the motor act of speaking, and language, okay? And so we need to be mindful that the inability to produce speech doesn't mean that a child can't communicate. And conversely, the ability to produce speech doesn't mean necessarily that a child is communicative. And what I mean by that is that, just because he can't motorically produce words with his mouth, he is now. Just because he motorically can't produce words with his mouth doesn't mean that we aren't going to meet the language demands. And so right now you hear him speaking, and a speech pathologist might say maybe he has the speech of a 6-year-old, okay? That doesn't mean that I'm going to limit his academics to that of a 6-year-old. I want to meet that language demand with other modalities, which is what the device is going to be doing for you and enable you to do, and the assistive technology. Still work on the speech. I know we all want to hear our first words of our children all the time. William spoke his first words at age 12. And that was beautiful, and it still is every time I hear him speak, because I know the effort that goes into speaking for him. But I also know that he would never have been able to speak motorically the introduction that he gave, but he was able to do that quite well with this device. And so apraxia of speech, again, is a speech motor disorder. And some kids, many kids with autism have both. Okay? We were told by our school team that you couldn't have both. And that got Mama Bear kind of mad. So I went and got an independent neuropsychology educational assessment because I wanted to, first of all, just prove their IQ. That was my main objective score that they had given me. Well, when the IQ score came back, it's almost impossible, in my opinion, to adequately assess a non-speaking child. A lot of the protocols don't allow for devices. And whatnot, and you have to talk to psychologists about what's allowed. So when the score came back, I was really disappointed. But then I spoke to the independent evaluator, and what he told me was, and it's a piece that I hung on to, and I still repeat to the parents that I mentor today, that intellectual disability or a score that reflects intellectual disability doesn't mean that a child can't learn. It means that they learn at a different rate. And I really hung on to that because I needed to have hope in my son that he could learn. That it wasn't the end of the road at age 9. I think, in 3rd grade they had him assembling nuts and bolts. And I thought, we need to be doing academics, we need to be teaching him literacy and all of those good things. So in the course of that, he also told me that he felt William had apraxia of speech, and he also said he wasn't a neurologist, but he suspected William might be having some seizure activity. And I thought, well, never, in my mind, the seizures crossed my mind because he'd never convulsed. I've never seen anything convulsive in him. And so you don't have to have convulsions to have seizure activity. You really should get an EEG. And those of you that are here, we have a vendor out there, EEG Go, that does do EEGs. And we have some neurologists speaking and out there today that you can go talk to them and learn more about what an EEG will show you. And what it showed in William that he was having seizure activity pretty much night and day. And where we were seeing a lot of like some staring spells or just kind of little mini blankouts was during speech therapy. So we took him to a speech pathologist, and with the hookup we did an ambulatory EEG. And what that showed was very interesting. It showed that William was talking right through his seizure activity. He wasn't blanking out, he was coherent, he remembered what they had talked about. But it did affect his voice output. So that gave us an answer. And it gave our doctor the direction to go through with her treatment plan, which we implemented. And as I said, William did speak his first words at age 12 following. So we saw our speech therapy session. One of the therapies that we do this for apraxia speech is called prompt therapy. And this is an oral tactile prompt, touch cue. So you're teaching your child to feel and produce the sounds where they come from. So I touched on your hair a lot because that's the T. That's the first one I learned, like learning where that location was for teaching William. And that was a sound that was really hard for him to learn, but we did, and successfully, and we still do that therapy today because he is motivated to speak, he wants to speak, but we have to work on the articulation so that he is able to use that in a functional and meaningful way. So I'm going to give you the definition of that there and the location to find that information because I'm not a practitioner and I'm not able to adequately present on that. I would mess it up, I can guarantee you. But you can go to the Prompt Institute, you can find some prompt therapists. There are some here in Southern California and across the country that are prompt trained that can help. And methods that we've used, you heard about rapid prompting method. So I'm not going to, again, present on that because I am not a practitioner in rapid prompting method, but you can go to halo-soma.org and you can learn more about rapid prompting methods. It's a teaching method. It's a method that got us from William using functional language. He can type functionally, his wants and needs and some teach-ask type things, but we could never get to the open-ended communication like what we saw in his introduction. Rapid prompting method taught us working, taught us that. So that's one method we've used. And the other that we've used as well is spelling to communicate. Spelling to communicate is a different method than rapid prompting method. I want to be very clear on that. But they are both methods that have helped William become the multimodal communicator that he is. This helps teach it like kind of in an AAC way. They focus very much on the motor movement and really speak to William because he does have practice of his whole body. Deficits in that, not just verbal apraxia. So you can find out more about them at growingkidstherapy.com. And also out in the hallway there is the IASC table. They have some practitioners that do practice in some communication. You can go talk to about that and communication regulation partners training. I do want to mention this because this was kind of my mom's guide to AAC, and some of the things that I did was practical AAC. It's a great blog. And I like it because you can almost use any type of AAC. You can use the letterboard, you can use a keyboard, you can use writing. William does write some. But it taught me how to introduce academics, and I love it because you can put in a subject into the search box such as literacy, and it will bring up some readable articles. There may be a page and a half to 2 pages, and suggestions and some links so that you can successfully advocate for your child at their IEP. So practicalaac.org, and they're on Facebook too. I like to watch and follow them still. United Communication for Choice, UCC, this is a grassroots organization that is out there really advocating for individuals that use alternative communication modes, multimodal communication modalities. They are not any one method specific, but they are very much about advocating and making change for an individual's right to choose their choice of communication. And just as some of us prefer some days to text, some of us prefer to talk, some of us in person, some prefer on the phone, some prefer email. It's my choice, and why wouldn't it be an individual's choice? And that's what, they're really advocating for that and making change so that, we will have a better platform for our children and our IEPs. Follow them. There's some great examples of independent communicators, and with accommodations, without accommodations, and so forth. This is a resource that I just threw in here because I did use this. It's from another AAC provider, or app provider, but it's a great checklist. It's kind of small to see, but I did put the link in your slides. And I like it because it kind of details and outlines who on your team, who they are, what their roles are, and it can vary. Sometimes I'm accountable for something, sometimes the speech pathologist is, or the teacher. You can kind of decide that as a team and use it as a guide. You can make your own, for your own team members, but I liked that. I thought that was very helpful when we were advocating for AAC and IEP. So we have a multimodal communicator now. He had verbal speech. He had high-tech and low-tech modalities. You can see he has an iPad, or he has the stencils or the letterboards, or sometimes writing. But, they're all available to him. We are not particular about how William communicates as long as he is able to communicate. So we have those with him in various forms. Those of you that know us and know William, his mini iPad goes with him everywhere. On the back, we have a letterboard, or I'll carry a letterboard, or I'll even have him just write out things. Now we're using more and more Bluetooth and typing and working towards independent typing, which is a new skill. And when we do that, we bring down the cognitive just a notch for him until we get that motor planning going and get his rhythm going. Some days he's spot on and he doesn't need as much motor warm-up. Other days he needs a little bit more. Brings me to my next point of presuming competence. So this was a hard piece for me. I had a child who liked to script and talk all day long about Blue's Clues and Sesame Street or whatever his favorite thing of the day was. And I would go and I'd buy all of those toys and buy all of those things for him. And then just, figuring out when someone told me you've got to stop dating your baby, you have to talk to him at an age-appropriate level. You have to presume that he understands. That was a little hard and unnatural at first, but the more I did it, the better it became. It really is the least dangerous assumption. You assume that they can learn, and you don't assume that they know everything, but you keep it age-appropriate. And you have to practice. So I asked a few of our friends what they felt about the presumption of competence. A little anxious as things go on. One of the benefits we have from doing all of this is it's made William very much more social. And we hang out with some really great friends. And he has two in particular that I asked if they would write something about what the presumption of competence means to them. And they allowed me to share it with you. And I apologize if the slide didn't get in, but I'm going to read it. So the first one is, I think presumption works both ways. I want to presume people believe in my abilities and my competence. I want to give people the chance to catch up to the new wave of typers, the tsunami of amazing autistics raining down on a prehistoric paradigm. I am more than what my list can better. Don't be afraid to show yourself one letter at a time. And that's from Otto. He's 15. He's an amazing young man. He inspires me every day. The next one is the act of presuming competence is and always should be the only way every human being must treat one another, differently abled or not. I have no right to presume your incompetence, nor should you presume mine. And that's from Bella, Queen Bee. She's 17. So those three kids are mastering their destinies every single day and inspire me, and they inspire each other, more importantly, and challenge each other to new and different things all of the time. The last one I had is from William, and what he had to say was the presumption of competence begins with thinking an individual can learn when they're given the opportunity. No person should feel they have to prove they are deserving of an education just because they can't speak. And as you all know, William is 19. So, you have to keep practicing. You have to keep at it. And I want you to remember that, it's not going to feel real natural at first. But I also want you to remember that every single day we are asking our kids to do new, different, and challenging things all the time. Don't be afraid to try something new yourself. Even if it isn't perfect, your kids aren't counting your mistakes. They're counting on you. So give that a try. We ask them to do a lot every single day. And it's nothing for us to give back a little. And, William makes me try new things like speaking in front of crowds every day. This is not my forte, but I'm here trying my best because of him. Beyond the classroom and therapy, we take, as I said, William's device and communication out everywhere. William has some great friends. We have built over the last 2 years an amazing community that stretches from San Diego to Ventura County. It's just incredible, and beyond. We have, from Canada as well, and, we're always connected somehow. There's so many groups I'm in, and it's great. We just went to a conference a couple of weeks ago, and it was great seeing everybody and knowing everybody, and, just reconnecting with them. So here he is at the Taco Picnic. We have a chat with our friend across the way, Elliot. And it's about the same as just William and communicating just as much. William swims. So Dan here is practicing his communication partner skills. William's not fluent with Dan on the letter boards or communicating, but he's trying. We did a workshop recently with a spelling communication workshop where she threw the dads in there. And it was really great because they are all fluent with their moms or their usual and customary communication partner. But when the dads went in there, it was a little different. And the dads had to learn and they had to step up. And I'm so glad they did. So we had a real challenge this year with me double caregiving, and Dan stepped up to the fight like a champ. And they were just fine. It was a great comfort knowing that. And it's also something that I wish William out of his comfort zone is multiple communication partners, because you do get dependent on one. And it's not uncommon, and it's necessary for some children, but I like to challenge William in that regard, because we have had continual challenges through the years, and we still do today, with finding communication partners who are available, and I want to always have them be able to communicate with the ultimate objective of complete independent typing. So, beyond classroom 2, yeah, we go out and do all kinds of things. So we swim, we flew on an airplane, we did a Great Wolf Lodge retreat with a bunch of our spelling friends. William was invited to the VIP at batting cage, batting practice, and he got to see like trout. Bait formation was a great thing for us. We're Catholic, and if you are Catholic or know someone who is, you know what a big deal making your first communion was. We wanted that for William very much, but we wanted it to mean something, so we did it a little bit later. Again, doesn't mean they can't learn. They might just get there at a different pace or their own pace. And we did it when we felt it was right for William, and it was meaningful to him. He's found a class he loves. He's also, this past spring, did his confirmation as well. So we did that. He's participated in, we have a group of like-minded friends who have similar faith beliefs, and we do a Skype Bible study. So get creative with your own friends, your own circle. Don't be afraid. If you've got a bunch of newbies, get on and do a Skype with them. Get together for lunch. We do that once a month with some friends here, and we have a friendship circle. Doesn't matter how they're communicating or what they're communicating, that's what they all are. They're typical teens hanging out at the food court, planning dances, planning excursions to the museum. Just to your friends, we went to the Sawdust Festival and we interviewed artists and did all of that. We went to the Passion of the Masters, those of you know what that is, and what a big long day that was. They rode the trolley, we had a little beach house. Next year they wanted to do an overnight. Typical teens at the college age want to go away for the summer. They'll have their moms with them, so we're not totally crazy yet. But it is fun, and the moms all get along too. So, Advocacy, this is my IEP binder. I'm just a mom, build your team. Our kids are listening too. And I want to really stress this. We don't ever really talk in front of William. You want to include them. If you're going to say something, ask their permission. Show respect. And, teach them respect. It's model behavior, just as you would want for any neurotypical kid. So one of the things, one of the things we did was we had our team come and see us at a workshop. And the teacher came, she was floored by how much William was communicating. She brought in 2 team members who were a little skeptical. And I wasn't working with him, the practitioner was, and she asked William to speak about respect. And so this is what William had to say. All right, well.
Mom isn't interested in fake respect. She is not my weakness. Good for her. She is my friend, for she respects me. When that first sentence came out, my mom isn't interested in fake respect. I way to throw your mom under the bus. But the whole team, we have a great team. They respect him, and they know not to talk in front of him. And now, he gives his team feedback. And, he was respectful, but he had something very important to say. Could he have said that with text? I don't think so. So 26 letters, infinite possibilities for William. I wanted to get to some questions and answers. So what we did was we had my peers, the ladies in the purple shirts, ask me questions of things they wanted to know. And I had William go through and pre-answer these because it does take him some time to type everything out. So I'm going to let him present, and I will forward the slide. Okay, well. What was hard to learn? How to work to speak words when my mouth only works like bent, twisted nuts that are tied tightly and stronger than me. Leanne, how fantastic that we met and you agreed to help loosen the sounds locked in my mind.
So William gives a similar presentation to his speech pathologist classroom of future speech pathologists, and so he has that to share with them each time about Leanne and how she helped him with his apraxia of speech using talk therapy.
How has this helped in your life? Life history was underestimated for so long. Now that learning to speak put my mind in a totally new light. For this always was my hope, and having a voice gives thoughts a way to be heard. How do you feel others view you? My putting words to thoughts mystify some. For people think we are stupid. Good to make them wrong. What makes Trump successful for you versus others? First, put yourself in my situation. My thoughts are intact, but my body will not cooperate. Teachers sometimes would try to make me say a word or sound, but my mouth wasn't able to move. Apraxia affects my whole body. What makes one modality harder than another for you? Really, the modality is not hard. It is mostly the way my motor is working that decides for me which mode I use. Best way to describe it is running too fast and tripping over your 2 feet. Only the thing I trip on is the words that my concentration lost. How does your body feel when using a specific communication tool? My body feels like a new body now that I have a way to dish, knowing I will be heard. What would be most helpful to you from the community members to make it easier to communicate within the community? Need to have people take the time to include me in a conversation too.
And that really is the best thing you can do if you're not sure. A lot of our kids have sensory and motor difficulties regulating themselves. We saw a little bit of William's anxiety creeping up here. Some are very much more obvious. The most interesting thing for me to see a child who has perfect articulation, and they might be scripting a movie script or something like that, and the whole time they're starting out a totally different conversation. And that happens quite often with William's peers. So, presume confidence. Don't presume just because they were singing a song from the Wiggles, which maybe is self-regulating their sensory motor system, that there's nothing going on in their head. Always read to them, expose your children to age-appropriate things. So he loves things like Jeopardy, he loves Frank Buckley interviews, he loves the Saturday morning news. All of that stuff he's learning, and our team wondered where he learned, about some of these things. And, he's picking up on it, and we include him. He has very strong political opinions and so forth. And him and his friends are hysterical. I mean, they could take a show on the road with their comedy and the interjections that they give and all of that. So you never know. Just give it a try. Again, least dangerous assumption.
What does it feel like to have a means of communication? What do you want others to know about individuals who use varying forms of communication? It feels terrific. Early on, I had no real way to communicate. All of us are intelligent. We just need to find our voices and be heard. How has this helped in your education? How much all of this has improved my education is totally mind-blowing. To think for so long my education lacked the foundation lights my desire to place a concentrated effort on academics, because abandoning my dreams of getting my diploma and going to college are no longer needed. What did, or do you do currently when things are tough and you feel overwhelmed and want to give up? I'm always having to give myself more understanding. Thinking about God, how He works in my life to put me on the path to my new place. In fact, God gives me strength tons of the time. So happy knowing He is only a prayer away. How do you build trust with your communication partners? The funny thing to understand is that developing trust is an interesting partnership. You must presume how a person who can't speak is intelligent, and I must think you are capable of teaching too. I started to think, knowing that most teachers saw me as non-thinking, I will never be able to experience real discussions. But that has changed now that I'm the communicator. No, I understand, but much to dish on. What do you want people to know about you? Know that how I learn best is when people presume competence. My thoughts are painted in words, not pictured. What do you want people to know about you? What are your hopes for the future? My hopes are to get a job, to be a writer, have a nice, caring place to live, days to spend working for my GED, then go to college. A purposeful life, with too much fun.
That really is our objective. That really is our objective for William, is to have his life be meaningful and purposeful. You know, of course, it'd be wonderful if and when he's ready to go to college. We're going to go at his own pace towards that. But, you know, really giving his life purpose, giving it meaning. You know, we met some individuals who are in their 50s now, and they were institutionalized back then, simply because they were non-speaking and autistic. You know, things, thank God, have changed so much for our kids. And, you know, that really is, you know, the independence, however William wants to do, we're just going to keep riding this wave and, you know, doing the best that we can. So we're just going to keep moving forward with that. So we thank you. We don't know where our journey is going to take us, but we're along for the ride and hope you'll be with us. I have a few questions here. So it says my daughter is 2 years old and can use a picture exchange with PECs. She has very minimal words, mostly echolalia. Any other tips you can give to encourage communication? You heard from William and some of his friends about presuming competence. That would be my suggestion. Keep it age appropriate. She's not going to be 2 forever. I would look at that blog. They have a great tool called the Year of Core Words. They give you 10 to 12 words every month, and they give you some phrases to model and incorporate. We did that with William, just playing match, the game of match, where you turn the cards over. But it wasn't just my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. You know, it was things like score, you know, good game, shuffle the cards, you know, all of those vocabulary words. I like it. I don't like it. If it was, you know, a food item that they turned over. So you're incorporating all that language. You know, at 2, that is appropriate for a 2-year-old. So start building your literacy and your language that way would be my suggestion. And, you know, when they're a little bit older, you know, consider the devices. You know, you can do them younger and younger. It used to be around age 8, but, you know, I like to tell parents that I mentor, and again, I'm not a professional, but this is my opinion, is, you know, give the presumption of competence, work on the speech, but if you're not really making the gains in the verbal speech that, you know, a lot of the more verbal kids with autism are able to do, where they're able to express and communicate, then build in the AAC piece. And even if they are verbal, like I said, you know, they may be speaking, but not necessarily communicating what's going on in their head, give them those AAC tools too. How long did it take for William to be efficient with Proloquo to go? I think because we had built all of those literacy skills, and building motor coordination. So with the alphabet that you saw, I would mix up the letters. I would do the file folder tasks that some of you that have used those in the past. I don't know if they still use those in the school, do they? I made them more academic. So it wasn't just matching color to color and all of that. I did it with the spelling of the colors, and I would mix those letters up, teaching William to scan and crossing the midline. Again, building in that motor movement that was going to give him the motor skills for pointing and selecting the icons. And I also gave William a robust language. And I didn't compartmentalize him. That was the piece I had initially trouble with Proloquo. It wasn't as robust as it is. They've given updates. I don't know what number we're on now, but in the earlier days, it was very much basic, and I did a lot of like DTT folder drills to go with it because I didn't know really about AAC, but I soon learned that really wasn't the right way to do things, because if he wanted to talk about a DVD, he shouldn't have to go to his Christmas folder, because that's where, you're going to ask Santa for a DVD. It should have been categorized maybe in toys or electronics or something. So it's built in that way now in Proloquo, but I would just, model it. If you have the benefit of 2 devices, we do that. We use one iPad for me, one for him, and we would play games and things to kind of show him and model. You still have to teach. You're presuming that they can learn, but you're not presuming they know everything. And the last one was, how long did it learn to progress through learning to use a letter board? So this was interesting. We did things backwards because we didn't know any different. We saw Selma's son Tito on TV using typing, and we thought that's what AAC was, and it wasn't. When we did the RPM method, he was already typing independently. His functional wants and needs. He can walk around and tell you what he wants. Right now he was saying, go home, or whatever it was he was talking to Dan about. He can do that in a functional way, but we were not really getting that open communication. So stepping back to the letter board was really a difficult step for me to take. Why would I go back from typing independently to a letter board? But what rapid prompting and spelling to communicate taught me was that in doing that, you're slowing the motor down, and the purposeful timing is how I would phrase it, of what was going on in his head and getting it to an output. Sometimes you need to slow it down. Some days, he said it depends how his motor's working. Some days his motor is spot on and he can type, 2 or 3